Now join palm. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. We're working on getting the fans off. David. I wanted to introduce our new Dharma Bum host, David. He's running for commissioner for a softball league, so if you want to vote for him.
Yes. I'll promise you stuff in one of the
So nice to see you all here. Anyone here for the first time? You want to share why you're here? Now that you already raised your hand.
I come to the recovery group on Sundays.
Yeah.
So kind of just having this on.
Nice. Good. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back. A couple other hands I saw. Yeah. Yeah.
Support and new journey.
Right on. Well, welcome. I think there was another hand somewhere here for the first time.
Just out of curiosity.
Curiosity for or of what? Meditation. So you're like brand new to all this stuff?
For the most part, I mean, I've done it in yoga classes, but not like this.
Yeah. Ooh, not like this. That sounds serious. Do you see the people that are in this room? Have you looked around, talked to them or anything? Yeah. Well, welcome. Glad you're here. Anybody else here for the first time? Anybody else keep coming back? Why do you show up?
Because tranquility, peace, not good. I mean, escape is probably better, but like,
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, it's a dedicated time that you can come and like just be present and you're kind of filling your own bucket.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I always say, and I'm sure you've heard me say, like, this isn't the escape, but early on Buddhist practice, and I talk about this a lot also, I know when I started, and very often for any people who begin this practice, this is the escape. You come to this being, whether it's meditation, Buddhist temple, spiritual journey, yoga, whatever it might be, we come to it as an escape from something. That's what leads so many people to this practice. And very often what they're actually trying to escape from is the craziness in their own head. And then you eventually realize, like, oh, wait a minute, I can't escape that. It's all right here. But early on, yeah, we're very often, not everybody, but very often people are just looking to go somewhere, be someplace around some people where they can just kind of be themselves and feel okay and take them out of the craziness that they were in all day or all week or all month or all year or whatever it might be, just something to change, something different. I just came from this afternoon. There's a place, facility for, I'm not even sure what they refer to it as, but it's called the V in La Jolla. Super nice place, beautiful. I felt it's, and I guess you call it a retirement community. It's not a like elder care facility. I mean, it's a retirement community, and people there are relatively healthy and able and all that. So I do meditation there every month, and the one woman who raised a hand, she's 94 years young, and she said her husband learned meditation service literally 70 years ago or something like that. And she was talking about how this sparked her to get back into the meditation practice. And I found it very fascinating because at any stage in our life, it's always something we can fall back onto, And somebody there had shared how they're always looking for some peaceful place to go to. And the topic then led to the discussion around learning to cultivate that peaceful place within your own mind, your own heart, because that's with you everywhere. And so while we do initially come to things like this to escape from the madness, from the craziness, whatever it might be, what we're really working towards and working on is finding that mindset in us everywhere. And then it doesn't matter where you are. That's the reality. If you're in an argument, if you're at work that's stressing you out, if you're around a family member that drives you crazy, I'm sure none of you have any of those. But no matter what the situation or experience is, you just stay steady with it. And that's ultimately the practice. Not easy, but that's where we're at. So for those who are joining virtually, the millions of followers, thanks for joining us. Feel free to say hello as you are, somewhere on your screen there, the chat box. We'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Right? Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? You're just going to sit and you're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside, and this is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, wherever you're sitting, wherever you are, often helps sliding the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Same thing if you're on a bench or a chair, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders, hand can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. Just means you have to move. Most important, especially if you're new, you're not trying to stop your thoughts, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're just going to sit and be with everything around us. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen and you react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It is not the escape that we're often looking for. It's direct perception into the present moment. And very often in our lives, that present moment is incredibly difficult and uncomfortable. And so we're often trying to run away from that present moment. And this practice is learning to be with life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in every moment. That's the practice. It never changes. And it's always there. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. We spend so much time trying to control others. And this practice is learning on controlling our mind, our hearts, and our reaction to the world around us. And then life gets simpler. You become one that just observes life as it occurs, not swept away in this massive ocean wave of experiences, which is where most people spend their lives. It's like a roller coaster for so many people. That's what life is. It's incredible highs, it's yay, and then it's like crash, everything's down. And then you're waiting for the incredible high again, and then it's this crash again. And so much of our life is like that. And this practice is just steady. One of the core teachings in Buddhism is equanimity. And allowing ourselves to be with each moment without the emotions getting so overwhelming. And that's difficult because we spent most of our lives being completely driven by our emotions. Our judgments, our critiques, our labels of others and ourselves. And then the emotions that follow them, and then the decisions that come from that. And that's how we spend a majority of our lives. Because it's seemingly impossible to just experience life as it occurs and just be present with what's happening. This is the Buddhist teachings on non-attachment. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you don't love. It doesn't mean you don't appreciate. It just means you don't get stuck. You just experience things. So I wanted to share briefly, there was just popped into my head, and so I thought I'd share this, but one of the college, we have a college group at San Diego State. 7-8 years ago, we started the nation's first and only co-ed Buddhist fraternity at San Diego State, because, you know, every college should have a Buddhist fraternity. And so it's been just the most mind-blowing experience working with these kids for the last 7-8 years. But anyways, one of them sent me a message and said, what's the wisest thing anyone, they're doing interviews right now. They have to interview people in the chapter to get to know them. We do all that fun, stupid Greek stuff that I did 30 years ago that some of you may have done. But, well, minus all the fun stuff that goes along with all that, and the stupid stuff that goes along with that, but we don't have time for that right now. And so they have to interview people in the group. And so one of them had asked me a question of what was the wisest thing anybody had ever said to me. And there were 3 things that came into my mind at that moment. And one was, I reflected back to when I was in college, and this has stayed with me for literally 30 years as a little fraternity guy. having to interview everybody in my experience, and I asked, his name was Paul Klokotka, which is completely irrelevant other than the fact that, I can literally see his name and see his face and remember this conversation. And they had to give us a quote. And his quote to me was, "Nobody cares about the storms you've encountered, but did you bring the ship home?" And I have often fallen back on that thousands of times, especially the last 20 years of Buddhist practice, of are you staying on course? And so often we make excuses in our lives for so many things. I'm sure none of you ever make excuses for anything, why you can't do something or why it's so difficult. But nobody cares about the excuses. I mean, people do, they'll listen to you, right? But we all have these excuses we fall into. But then we just live in the excuse. And we never come out of that excuse. So that one has been a profound teaching to me, which obviously pre-Buddhist days, but I find that to be an incredibly Buddhist expression. Except ultimately in Buddhism, there's no ship and no waves, so it doesn't really matter. And the second one was when I arrived at monastery in Taiwan in 2005. It was the first day. It was like this 20-hour trip. I was exhausted. I show up first day Chinese Lunar New Year, and I'm not even sure if this thing was real or not. Like my memory, it was real, but I was just so exhausted and jet lagged, and hadn't slept in probably at this point 48 hours. So I don't know if this conversation actually happened or if I just imagined it. But either way, I'm sticking with it. And I never saw this nun again. It was just like one moment, one encounter. I still remember the bottom of the mountain there. And she asked me what I was doing there. And, I shared a few thoughts. And her response to me was, never forget the original intention of why you showed up here. I told her where I came from and blah, blah, blah. Never forget the original intention of why you came here. And so this was 18 years ago. And that still motivates and inspires me because, throughout our spiritual journey, whatever that means to you, you're going to face challenges. You're going to face difficulties. You're going to face experiences that make you want to jump, quit, change course. Because it's not easy. The more you practice this stuff, I often tell people that the more you practice Buddhism, the more difficult it gets. It doesn't make life easier at first because it requires you to actually be honest with yourself and ask yourself, what are my excuses? What am I running from? And so every time you face difficulty, come back to why you started on a spiritual journey to begin with and stick with that. And that has nothing to do with here or this place or me or anything about Buddhism. Whatever spiritual journey means to you. Don't lose sight of that. Because there's a reason people show up to places like this. Don't forget that, whatever that reason is, which is different for everybody. And then the third one was, this was 2007. So this was about 16 years ago. And I was arguing with a buddy of mine, good friend of mine. We were just in a, nothing like we weren't punching each other. It's nothing like too heated or anything, but just kind of an argument, debate about something. And he said something to me, and then my response back was, it's just how I am. And he looked at me and he said, well, then maybe you should change how you are. And I was like, wow, you're absolutely right. I mean, I didn't say that at that moment. I continued to argue. But, 5 minutes later, it hit me right away. But of course, in that moment, I was still in argument mode. But I've never forgotten that. And that was, somebody calling me on my stuff. And I think if you find people in your lives around that, that's important. To me, that's part of what Sangha is. That's what friendship is, the spiritual journey is to, be able to have somebody call you out on your stuff. And don't be afraid to maybe admit, they're right. You know, has a lot to do with dropping the ego, the attachment to self, the stories we tell ourselves. But in that moment, and what we were arguing about, which was actually about a Buddhist thing, and he was right. I needed to change. So I'll pause there. Open up to questions. Anything that's on your mind, meditation, Buddhist practice. Anything you're sitting with. For me, really just prefer to respond to questions. For those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Nice to see you all here. As you are, there's a chat box on the screen there somewhere. Feel free to say hello. And if you have any questions, feel free to chime in there. So we'll spend the rest of our brief time tonight just respond to questions. Yeah.
Last week you had mentioned that the emaciated Buddha was your idol.
Yeah, my hero.
Yeah, your hero.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what that figure of the Buddha represents?
Yes. Yeah, great. So this is probably one of my favorite stories. Some of you may have heard it before. So for those who don't know, the Buddha was just, I'll give you like the 60-second version of the life of the Buddha. He was just a dude, just a human, born, raised a prince, father was a king, mother was the queen, and it was said when he was born that he would either become a great king or an enlightened one, you know, like a real spiritual leader. So the father, of course, wanted him to be a king, so they sheltered him. Very long story short, 29 years summed up. They never let him outside of the palace. Never let him see old age, sickness, or death. Because they knew he had such a gentle heart that if he went outside and he saw the way the world really was, he wouldn't want to stay inside. Okay, have you heard this story or no? Okay. And so 29 years old, he finally sneaks out. And it happens over 4 times, but he sees old age, sickness, death, and an ascetic, kind of like a simple nun or monk, like a yogi, a wanderer. And he said to his buddy Chana, he was like, what is this old age, sickness, and death? Does this happen to all of us? And Chana said, yes, my lord, we all age. We all get, not even old age, we all age. We all get sick and we all die. That's all of us. And so then he came across the ascetic, kind of the simple wandering yogi, and that really had an impact on him. So 29 years old, he leaves the palace. And he'd said to his buddy, I can't live a life of, wealth and riches when there's a world out there that's suffering. I mean, he had everything. He's a prince in India 2,500 years ago. Had it all. And said, I'm out of here. I mean, probably not those exact words. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But, so he left. And he met up with 5 guys. Again, a lot of things happen on this story. But he met up with 5 guys that were kind of traveling yogi buddies. And at that time in India, they were Hindu. So they had the Hindu practice, Hindu belief. And they thought that to awaken, enlightenment, was to overcome attachment to physical form, like to the physical body. They thought that's what you needed to do to become enlightened. And so they would do these crazy yogi practices, like they would stand on one leg for weeks at a time or hold onto a tree and hang from a tree for, days at a time, really kind of stressing their attachment to the physical body. And they began to starve themselves, eating 1 grain of rice a day. You know this part of the story too? Okay, so this is where it gets interesting, right? This is the statue. So 1 grain of rice a day is what they lived on. And it's said that he was so skinny, you could take your fingers, one to the front, one to the back, and that they would actually touch each other. That's where the word emaciated comes from, emaciated Buddha. So then he's with these 5 guys, and he comes to a riverbed. He was hungry. And there was someone there offering him food. And all his buddies were like, no, you can't eat. And he says, well, I'm hungry. I want to eat. So he took the bowl and he said, I'm going to take this and set it in the stream. And if the bowl goes against the stream, then I'm going to eat it. So he put the bowl in the stream. Bowl goes against the stream. He begins to eat. Those 5 guys, they left him. They're like, you're a sellout, you're a traitor, you're a food eater. Alex, who tells the story, always says food eater. I love it. And so they bailed him. So there he is on his own, and he began to eat food. And this is where you have in Buddhism what's called the middle path, right? Anyone here play guitar? Play guitar? You got a guitar. Strings are too tight. What happens? Snap. Too loose?
Buzz.
No sound, right? Buzz. So that's us very often in life. These extremes. And so he went from a life of this wealthy prince to starving himself near death, right? So he begins to eat, he discovers the middle path. And in Buddhism, for us as lay people, I mean, we're not nuns, we're not monks, we're just regular folks. I mean, they're regular folks too, but, right? So we try to find a balance in our lives. And that's different for everybody. Whatever your extremes are, try to find a balance. That's important for each of us, regardless of what that is, right? I'll come back to that in a minute. But to finish the story, so at that time, they leave him. He goes off on his way. Eventually sits down for 21 days under a Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, India. And he says, I'm not leaving until I figure out why we suffer. He sat down. He discovered that we suffer because of the nature of our own mind. Our craving, our desire, our sense of self, our attachment to sense of self, our ego. And after 21 days, he said, I understand the nature of our mind. And then that tapestry above the exit sign there, the 5 dudes that are sitting around him, those are the 5 guys that like called him a food eater and bailed. They saw him and they said, hey, there's Siddhartha. It looks like he's figured something out. Let's go sit with him. And he taught the first teaching that's at Deer Park called the first turning of the Dharma wheel. And that's where he taught the 4 Noble Truths that all of Buddhist teachings come from. First thing to sum up, he said, life is suffering, dukkha, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. Doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means you're going to struggle a lot in your life. That's the first thing he said. You will experience a lot of suffering in your life. The second thing he says is the cause. The cause is the 3 poisons: greed, anger, ignorance. We always want more. We're angry how everything's working out, and we're ignoring reality, true nature of reality, meaning we're stuck in our own head, our own stories, and we're not paying attention to reality. So we practice generosity, compassion, wisdom to overcome that. The third thing he says is there's an ending of suffering, liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering. And the fourth is the Eightfold Path. And this is all on Google for free. Just stay on the first 2 pages of Google, right? Correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. This is our karma and our way of life. That's the heart of the Buddhist teachings right there, right? So he taught that. They said, you are awakened, we will call you the Buddha. The Buddha it's just a word, it means awakened, right? And then he went and he taught for 45 years, roaming around India, and then he died at 80. So back to the question of the emaciated statue, that's what it represents, is the time where he was starving himself. The reason we picked it 17 years ago when we opened the Dharma Bum Temple is, one, you don't just start a temple, right? I mean, it's kind of stupid. And you wouldn't just do that. And when we did it, we were physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death. No different than this guy. And so when we went to the old Buddha for You in the old college area, that's a whole other story before we became Buddha for You, we picked out the emaciated Buddha because it represented us. We didn't want to sit with this enlightened Buddha like that we were trying to be these awakened beings. We wanted to sit with the dude that was near death because that was where we were. So we sat with him as a guide, as a friend, as a mentor. Like I said, for me, as my hero. It's just a regular person because that's all he was. He was just a regular person, no different than any one of us in this room. And for us, it was very inspiring to think that if this regular person who ate, slept, went to the bathroom, no different than we do, could figure out how to end his suffering, then so can we. So that's why we picked him. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah. That's the emaciated Buddha. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Jeff, oh, I thought you were. No. I thought you were starting to.
Thank you though.
Yeah. What else? There's a question here. Hi, Amy. Glad you're here. I've been struggling with judgment of self and others. Do you have any advice on how to let it go? Anyone here struggling with judgment on self and others? Amy, for the record, every hand is up. Actually, not everyone. We have a bunch of liars in the room. But you got about half the hands and half full of liars. Good thing we're not doing the precept tonight. So this idea of judgment, just want to see how you worded it. I've been struggling with judgment of self and others. Do you have any advice on how to let it go? You know, I think there's so many different ways to approach this, but first, I think it's important, which I know you've heard me say, but to understand that we've been judging ourselves and others our entire lives. So I think it's a little unrealistic, personally, to set this aspiration or goal that you're just all of a sudden going to wake up one day and stop judgment. It's not going to happen. You know, I mean, when we're little kids, like, parents typically don't say, hey, go pick out ugly clothes and put them on. Right? Anyone who's raised kids probably doesn't go into like their kids' rooms and just pick out like the worst outfit in the world and puts that on, unless you're what's the name, the Adam Sandler. Come on, work with me here.
Big Daddy.
Thank you very much, Big Daddy. And Big Daddy, and you know, he dresses like Scuba Steve to school, you know? Meaning he just told his kid to go wear whatever he wanted. Like literally anything. Go wear anything you want. And if you haven't seen Big Daddy, one, go see it. It's hysterical and funny and cute and beautiful at the same time. It's Adam Sandler who ends up with a kid, right? And he just tells his kid to go put on anything he wants to go to school. And so he puts on like this scuba mask and like the scuba flipper things and calls him Scuba Steve, right? He didn't care what he looked like. The kid didn't care what he looked like. The dad didn't care what he looked like. But we spend our entire lives caring about what we look like, truly. Okay? So it starts from super early on. One practice you could try, Amy, is, and anybody else can try this as well. When you get home, or Amy, you're probably at home, remove the mirrors in your house for like a day. Just one day. Don't look in the mirror. And then when you get in the car, you're going to be like, oh, there's a mirror. There's a mirror. Just remove the mirrors. I mean, how many times do you look in the mirror a day? Who wants to play along? Since Amy's virtual and can't play along. How many times do you look in the mirror a day?
15.
15. Do you look different each time?
Depends on the light.
Depends on the light, right? I appreciate you playing along. You know, it's always fun when somebody plays along. So you look different because of the lighting, but are you different?
Every moment.
Yeah, I know.
I got it.
You get it. And yes, in every moment we are different. I'm not the one who sat down here, and I'm not the one who's going to be getting up. But let's drop all the Buddhist crap for a minute, right? When you look at the mirror, are you any different? No, it looks exactly the same. Your view, your judgment, your perspective, your perception is different based on the lighting and your mood, how you feel, right? If you're in a good mood, maybe you think you look good. If you're in a bad mood, maybe you think you look terrible, right? We do this our whole lives. You just spend 30 minutes looking in the mirror to get ready, and then you go by the front door and look in the mirror again, and then somehow you think you magically changed from the moment you walked out your door to the moment you sat down in the car. Because then you got to look again. Because the wind blew everything everywhere, and all of a sudden you look completely different now, from the door to the hallway to the car. You look so different, So, I mean, the question, Amy, and Amy's known me a long time, of, I'm struggling with judgment of self and others. Start by doing things that remove the conditions that you've set up for yourself to judge yourself. And this is my example of just wear socks that don't match, put on shirts that don't match, that don't match your shoes. Start putting things in your life that create situations where you're going to judge yourself less. Because judging yourself and judging others, it's really the same thing. It's just a comparison. Comparing how you looked from the moment you stepped outside the door to the moment you got to the car. Comparing what you look like to every billboard and magazine and advertisement, every, social media post, billions of dollars spent telling you what you should look like. Our whole lives, everyone is telling us how we should look. And here's the thing. I'm not even suggesting that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, unless it's destroying you. And that's the question. If you want to wear shirts that match your belt, that match your shoes, and you want to make sure your hair looks a certain way and your makeup looks a certain way and that you look a certain way, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I ask you to ask yourself is, why are you doing that? That's the question. And is it really benefiting us? Or is it just exposing all of the things we're afraid of? Which is just what we look like. So, as usual, Amy, that probably didn't help you at all. But, one thing you can do also, I think I found over the years with this kind of a self-compassion and like a compassion for other practices. I mean, think how we feel when you think somebody's judging you. When you judge others, you're in essence doing the same thing to them. So on a very practical level, try to understand that as you're judging others, it doesn't feel good because you know that feeling. So that's tough. And I think if you look at the life of the Buddha as an example, he had all, like I said, as a prince, all the wealth, all the riches, all the clothes, all that fancy stuff. And very symbolically, when he left the life as a prince, the first thing he did was he took you'll see images of it, but he took his long, beautiful princely hair and he cut it. And that's where the tradition of nuns and monks shaving their heads come from, is to show, especially in that culture, something that we're so attached to is the hair, the physical appearance. And as a prince, that was a sign of royalty, I guess. So he cut it to show him over that attachment. And just wore a robe that was patched together from cloth. And that was it. Just a simple robe. And I don't mean like bathrobe that you're lounging around in all day long. Some of you might be thinking like, I could just live in a robe all day long. That'd be cool. Right? But look at the things we're attached to. It's tough. Because then when we want to figure out how do we not attach to things and people that really matter, and we're so attached to our shoes. So. Thanks, Amy. Amy said, that's really good. I'll do it. I think you're on to me. You'll do what? Get rid of all the mirrors for a day? I want to hear an update on that. So we'll do one more question. And you can all try it. Seriously, try it. You don't have to like yank mirrors off the walls, but like cover them up for a day. just to show you how addicted you are. Like this is really, it's an addiction. You know, we think of things that, you know, recovery, sangha, addiction, drugs, alcohol, things like that, but we're addicted to how we look. It's a very serious addiction that we don't always explore. So just try covering your mirrors for a day and see how difficult that is for you. So we'll do one more question thought. If anybody has one. I don't know if the hand was going from here to here to
Just had
here.
an itch.
Okay, I was just checking.
I was nervous.
It's all right. The nervous silence. Anything else before we close? All right, we're good. So we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Lama Zopa Rinpoche during his time of rebirth. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So just a few quick announcements from our Dharma Bum host, David. He's not new, I was teasing him before. He's a veteran.
I am running for Dharma Bum. Dharma Bum host all-stars, so please cast your votes. We opened Dharma Bum Temple 16 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, teachers. They're not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice with others. Almost every night we have different classes led by people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone battling addiction. And our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We also have a lending library. If you see a book you like, please feel free to borrow it and then bring it back when you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. Thank you for being here. We wish you well. Hope to see you again.
Thank you.